time today for step 3. So in step 2 we covered probably my least favorite thing to do out into the yard, and that was aeration. But now that that part's over with and we've had this sitting here for just a couple weeks now, probably getting a little bit of moisture, more air down into the root zone, things are looking good back here. But it's time for our next step, and probably the most important one of the year. That's going to be hitting this yet with a bunch of fertilizer this fall before our cold temperatures set in. So I've mentioned it a couple times before, but again, it's worth mentioning that fall is going to be our most important time for our cool season grasses and to fertilize them properly. So we're at the prime time right now for where I live. It's just cooled down. Last week we had some hot temperatures, but it looks like that's pretty much gone for good. Of course, we don't know what could happen with the weather, but for now, in at least the 14-day forecast, 10 to 14 days out, it's looking like it's going to be much cooler, and now it's the prime opportunity to get some fertilizer on the yard. I've been doing this fall program on my yard for probably the last 3 or 4 years or so. It's not only worked well to strengthen what I have here and have it looking great in the fall, but next spring the results really show. I seem to get an earlier green up than pretty much everyone around me, and in the spring you can just tell the grass is coming out of that winter much healthier, and that's exactly what we want. So something that I did not touch on after step 2 was overseeding, and because I have a Kentucky bluegrass yard, I haven't found that overseeding really works or does all that much for me, just because my yard is pretty thick to begin with. But if your lawn is kind of thin and you're just getting started on this and it doesn't look thick like this, then it's definitely a good idea to overseed after you complete that aeration. And I have a whole video series that I completed last fall on how to overseed your yard, how to water it afterwards, all the steps that you need to take, so I will link that down in the description below if you'd like to learn more about that. The main question then is probably going to be, what fertilizer are we going to use? And to me, it doesn't really make a huge difference. In the past couple years, I've used various different things and it hasn't made too much of a difference, but probably what would be best case scenario would be to find something that's more of a quick release fertilizer. Alright, so this fertilizer right here is something that I got at Menards earlier this spring. So if you go to any of those stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, those types of stores, they're going to have a bunch of different fertilizers. Sometimes they have kind of like a generic brand, which is what I think this one is. It's kind of like the Menards generic brand, or it's just kind of an off brand. Not one of the major ones, but I haven't found any differences between using those and using something like this, but I'm not sure what's going to be available for me to link for you if you're looking for a product that you'd like to maybe just grab off Amazon, not have to go to the store. So I'll see what I can find and check the link in the description below. I have used Scott's in the past. Works perfectly fine as well. Sometimes it's just a little bit more expensive, but if that's what you want to do and it's just readily available for you, just get whatever. Alright, so let's look at our analysis, and this is going to be the important part. So this bag has 28% nitrogen, which is the N, and then it has 3% of the potash, and it has 1% of the iron. So we have no phosphorus in here whatsoever, which for me is okay because I've been using Milorganite, which has phosphorus in it. So a balanced fertilizer for you, like something like a starter fertilizer, if you've never done any of these steps before, would be fine. Something like a 10-10-10 is fine, but usually starter fertilizer has more phosphorus. That just depends on what your soil actually needs and if you've ever been doing any of these steps before. So I can't specifically say what you should use there, but if you just want to follow this program with me for the fall, you want to do a soil test maybe in the spring to see what actual requirements you need, that would work as well. So again, 28% nitrogen. We can see right down here it says 6% is slowly available urea. So what is the urea nitrogen? Well, it's basically just an inexpensive form of nitrogen, and usually if you buy urea straight, it's going to be an analysis of 4600. So it has a very high nitrogen level, it's quick acting, and it's fairly inexpensive. So you could use something like urea, and you can buy it from various places. However, if you're just getting started out with this, you're not super comfortable, then there's a little bit more of a risk of burning your lawn if you over apply it, if the temperatures aren't right, if you don't get it watered in correctly. That's why I like to just stick with these homeowner versions. It's worked for me in the past. It's a little bit less risky, but if you're more comfortable with it, you can go with urea. So this one is a 28%, but 6% of that is slow release. So how do they get the slow release? Well, they normally just coat it with something so that it takes longer to break down. That's basically all that happens when they're doing slow releases. But for us right now, when we're getting closer to the end of the season, we don't want a lot of slow release because it won't do us really a whole lot of good if it's sitting there waiting to release and then winter comes and it's just sitting there. So the whole point of this program, once the cool weather starts, is to get down a decent amount of fertilizer every 2 weeks until we hit the little bit colder season and the grass starts to slow down. Now, if you're doing any more research, you're likely going to see how many pounds of nitrogen you're supposed to put on a certain grass type in a certain year. So for Kentucky bluegrass, it's much higher than some of the other ones. It's usually 4 to 6 pounds depending on what kind you have. I have a pretty high maintenance bluegrass lawn here, so between 4 to 6 pounds is probably okay for me. And remember that I just put down Milorganite in the spring. I didn't do anything in the summer because my lawn was dormant, and I put an application of Milorganite down right around Labor Day. So without getting into too much crazy math here, let's just say I over applied it slightly. We'll round up a little bit. Let's say I applied 1 pound in the spring on Memorial Day, and I applied 1 pound on Labor Day. So we're only at 2 pounds for the year. So this is why this fall program works for me, is because I'm behind on nitrogen, and in the fall is when the grass can actually take it up the best, store it for the next season, and then we're ready to go. So then the last question is how to figure out how to put down that 1 pound per thousand in an application, or however much the bag is telling you to put down. So for this bag specifically, again, we're at 28% nitrogen. So let's take 100 divided by 28. That's going to give us 3.6, roughly. We rounded a little bit there. And that's telling us that we need 3.6 pounds of this actual product to give us 1 pound of nitrogen on the lawn. Now, for marketing purposes, you can see that they wanted a nice even number for this bag to cover. So they want 10,000 square feet. So when you're in the store, you say, okay, my lawn is 9,000 square feet, so I know that this bag will cover it. And so that's kind of what they did there. And this is saying that this will cover 10,000 at 3.2 pounds per thousand. So remember, our number of 3.6 gives us 1 pound of nitrogen per thousand. So for this bag, if I put my spreader at the setting that's listed down here, it's going to give us slightly less than 1 pound per thousand. It's going to be pretty close, so I'm not too worried about it. I'll put it at about that setting there, and it will be very close. So I'm going to apply this now every 2 weeks until the grass slows down. Normally for me, that's around late October or so. It's going to depend on where you live for how much it slows down in your area and timing. So whenever you want to start this is, again, I'd say right as the weather starts to cool and you see the forecast being a lot more cool weather, that's when I would start this program. And if you don't get super cold where you live, but you still have cool season grass, then again, this doesn't have to be every 2 weeks. It could be spread out maybe once a month, once every 3 weeks, whatever you want to do. But just keep track of how many pounds of nitrogen you've been putting on the lawn. And again, don't go really over the recommended rate for your grass type. Okay, so we're done laying our fertilizer, and now I would recommend to water it in. It's just going to make sure that the product is activated a little bit quicker. Since we are dealing with a synthetic fertilizer, it's always better to make sure that it's watered in if possible. If for some reason the temperatures get extreme again and it's sitting on the yard, the risk of burning is just much lower if you just water it in. Pretty easy process. So if you don't want to water it in, then just try to do this before rain if possible. But before I'm going to do that today, I'm going to do 2 extra things just before I do this watering to kind of add a little extra to this fertilizer application. That's going to be an application of this soil loosener. I've talked about this in another video that I did earlier in the summer. And what I'm learning about this product is that really in the traditional sense, it is more of a wetting agent. So what does that mean? Well, specifically when we're coming out of the end of our summer season here, the lawn has probably been kind of dry at some point. Even if you've been watering with a lot of the heat, sometimes the ground gets a little bit dry every once in a while. And so that can kind of create a hard crust on top. It can be harder for water to really soak into that, and more water is actually just kind of running off the surface. What this does is it's just going to help us use water more efficiently. If we just think about it in the simplest of terms, it's basically a very high-powered soap, which is going to help that water to soak into the soil much better. And right now, since I have those holes opened up from aeration, I just put down some fertilizer. I want to make sure everything soaks in really well if possible. So I'm going to spray some of this down. And then also I've talked about Humic Acid, which is kind of all the rage this year, but it's been used by a lot of people for a long time, and it's just kind of getting popular for homeowners. But I'm going to spray down some humic acid, and what that is going to hopefully do is help us to just better use those nutrients that we just put down, help the soil and the grass to better take that nitrogen. And so those couple things are just a little added extra thing that you can do if you'd like to. If you'd like to learn more about these two things again and watch those other two videos, I'll have links to those as well. So if you buy a liquid fertilizer from Simple Lawn Solutions, you're going to get this little green thing that comes with it, or it'll be some color. And that's just a nice little sprayer that kind of built in comes off, and it's just easy to use. You just hook your hose right to it and you can use that. But if you don't have that and you just want to buy this product, or maybe the humic acid, then I would recommend this thing right here. So I can't remember the exact price, but I'll have a link to it on Amazon. And so this thing should come right off and go right on this bottle, and it should fit perfectly there. Okay, and then settings as far as this thing go, I don't know why they set this to teaspoons, but that's how they have it. So according to the manual, 1 ounce will be 2 teaspoons. So if we needed 1 ounce of this product and you were going to use this instead, then you would set the dial on the top to 2 and then spray it out evenly. And this product goes a long way. It recommends only 1 ounce per 1,000 square feet. With a setting of 2, you're not putting out too much there, and this bottle should go a really long way. Now with the humic acid, so it's saying here that you want to use 3 ounces and apply that to 1,000 square feet evenly. With a setting there on here, you would actually be at the setting of 6. So that kind of explains that. If you want to use this thing, or if you want to buy like a liquid fertilizer from them, then you will get one of these as well. That humic acid is some messy stuff, so just a bit of a warning there with that. And also, you can probably tell from that video, it's extremely windy today, not the greatest time to be spraying anything. Sometimes though, you just gotta do what you gotta do. This is the time that I have to do it, and it's a little bit windy, so you just gotta work with the wind and make sure that you're going in the right direction. Well, that's gonna do it for the fertilizing on step 3 and a couple other things that I did today as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks so much for watching this one. We'll see you next time.